All right, well, I will go ahead and get started with some business and updating that needs to happen before we really get into the meat of today's webinar. I am really excited to welcome you to Senior Law Day 2021. This is a little bit of a misnomer because we are presenting informational webinars from September 7th until October 7th. Every Tuesday and Thursday at noontime. And we are still presenting these virtually this year. This is our second year in the virtual format. Our hope is that next year we will be able to be back in person. I know we really miss seeing folks in person and consolidating all this learning into one day. But for right now, because we are virtual, we have a few pieces of business to touch on. One is that today's webinar is being recorded. The video will be available later at the Boulder County Senior Law Day website or on our YouTube channel. It's really easy to access. Usually give us about a week or two to get those uploaded, but if you enjoyed today's webinar and have friends that you think would benefit from it, feel free to share any of these webinars. We have muted all participants. Please remain on mute unless we invite you to unmute yourself. We shouldn't be asking that today. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during this presentation. There are two things at the bottom of your screen you can use. You can use the Q&A box or the chat box and just type your question into the chat. We are going to be waiting until the end for questions. But one of the things I love about the Q&A in the chat box is that you can type your question in as you think of it, and then make sure it's still answered while the question is fresh in your mind. As I said earlier, we are holding these webinars every Tuesday and Thursday until October 7th is our last one. All of these webinars are from noon to 1. And you can sign up for any of the additional webinars on our website, bocoseniorlawday.org or bouldercountyseniorlawday.org. These, the next webinar coming up is going to be on retirement income and planning for that. And it's going to be exciting because there's a lawyer and a financial planner on that one. Very excited to announce that Ask a Lawyer is back. We are going to be hosting 2 in-person free legal clinics. These are opportunities to consult with an attorney. It's first come, first served, so just show up at the location and sign up and wait your turn. And we have lots of attorneys and lots of volunteers ready to help you out. Our first clinic is actually this Saturday, September 11th. It's going to be held at the Longmont Senior Center at 910 Longs Peak Avenue in Longmont. And that will be held from 9 a.m. until noon. Masks, we just found out, are going to be required in Longmont. The Boulder event is going to be September 25th at the Boulder Age Well Center at 909 Arapahoe Avenue in Boulder. And that will also be from 9 to noon on September 25th. Masks are also required at the Boulder location. If you cannot make these in-person events, there is still the option to utilize the free legal clinic hosted by the Boulder County Bar Association. They are one of our platinum sponsors this year. And since the pandemic started, they have started a virtual legal clinic. It works really well and has helped many, many people since March of 2020. You can fill out an application on the Boulder County Bar website, or you can call their office at 303-440-4758 to sign up. Callers get paired with a volunteer attorney, and the caller and the attorney schedule a time to provide a 20 to 40-minute consult. Senior Law Day handbooks. Normally we would pass these out in person. Unfortunately this year, that's not an option. However, we do have a website that you can go and download the Senior Law Day handbook at. And this gives you the 2020 version. The 2021 version has not been released yet. For anyone watching the screen, there's also an opportunity to access the handbook via a QR code, which is to the right of the website URL. It works just like at a restaurant. When you're pulling up the menu, wave your camera phone in front of the QR code and you'll get the link to the handbook, and you can download it that way if that is convenient. Finally, we want to thank our sponsors, Boulder County Bar Association, Firle Fiduciary Services, and Fraser are our platinum level sponsors. We could not do this without their help. At our gold level, we have Jorgensen, Brownell, and Pepin. Silver, we have Hofgaard Law, Bach Financial. And our bronze sponsors are Kingsbury, Johnson & Love, and Friends of Longmont Senior Services. And I'd like to personally thank our planning committee. It takes a lot of work to put on an event like this, and our planning committee has just been fantastic this year. With that being said, I am very excited to introduce today's speakers and topic. Today is about protecting yourself from scams and frauds in 2021. And we have two representatives from the District Attorney's Community Protection Unit. We have Desiree Firle, who is the Community Protection Specialist at the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. Desiree is the Community Protection Specialist. Her experience includes working with the Intertribal Council of Arizona, the Area Agency on Aging, Region 1 in Phoenix, Arizona, Boulder County Area Agency on Aging, and Workforce Boulder. Desiree has an MSW from the University of Denver with an emphasis on organizational leadership and policy. We are so excited to welcome her this year. And then we also have Christian Gardner-Wood, who is the Director of Community Protection and Legislative Affairs and a Senior Deputy District Attorney for the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. He's been a prosecutor for 14 years. And as the Director of Community Protection, he oversees all prosecutions in the DA's office involving at-risk victims, elder victims, significant economic crimes, and also oversees community outreach and policy initiatives for the office. So a job that is really about 10 jobs in reality. His passion is community engagement and prosecuting crimes involving vulnerable populations. He has trained extensively in the areas of elder abuse, mandatory reporting, child abuse, sex offenses, and human trafficking. He is the chair of the Colorado Human Trafficking Council, and he is involved in local groups involving at-risk cases, including the Adult Protection Review Team and the Elder Justice Coalition. With that being said, I will turn this over to Christian and Desiree and thank them once again for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate the introductions and the opportunity to do this webinar today. It's always a pleasure for us to be a part of Senior Law Day. We share in the desire to hopefully next year be back in person and get to be in the same room with all of you, but are glad that we're able to still do the sessions this year. And thank you to Brett and the planning committee setting this up for us. Today, we're going to talk specifically about protecting yourself from scams and frauds, really looking at kind of an overview of what our folks are doing right now when we're talking about scams and fraud. What does that generally look like? And then I'll spend some time talking about some specific scams and frauds that we're seeing right now. And then we'll talk at the end about kind of protecting yourself generally from scams and frauds, and also how to recover from those scams and frauds. And then we want to make sure that we leave some time at the end so we can deal with any questions, concerns from folks. So we'll go through fairly quickly, but this is certainly a priority for us when we're talking about dealing with cases involving vulnerable populations, particularly our older adult population, knowing that people are ultimately looking to prey on individuals to get money from them, take their personal identifying information, and that's really the focus of the scams and frauds that we're going to be talking about today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Desiree to talk more about the overview of what we're seeing in this area.
So what we know is that in 1995, it really opened up the advancement of technology. So no longer we're getting phone calls or people coming to our doors, mail in our mailboxes, and television scams coming through. But now scammers have a wide variety of how to connect with us through email, websites, our cell phones that are smartphones, text messages, and applications. So right now, what the scammers are really doing is pretending. There's a term for it called imposter scams that people are giving you a call, pretending to be such organizations like the IRS or Social Security Administration, or even well-known businesses like Microsoft and Apple. And then once they get a hold of you, they're presenting you with some kind of problem or a prize or reward. Such as example right here, where you get a phony Social Security call saying that your Social Security number has been frozen. That's an example of a negative problem, or possibly a prize that you've won some kind of large prize. However, you're going to have to pay the individual on the phone for that prize. So the other thing that they're asking for is the confirmation of personal information, such as the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, or your email address, and really trying to make it look like that they have the information on file, but then also you're confirming that information. The scammers are also going to put a sense of pressure or urgency on the person who's on the other side of the phone. They're going to apply pressure saying that you're going to miss out on this opportunity, or that you need to act now because there's a police officer on the way to your home. Scammers are also going to ask you to pay in a very specific way. What I've been hearing most about is gift cards, Google Play gift cards, where they then ask you to give the numbers on the back of that gift card once you've purchased it. Also Bitcoin through cryptocurrency, and also through wire transfer. So one of the things I want to share too is the impact of the victim. So a lot of times when people are being scammed out of money, and they might be scammed upward of $100,000, is that it's not necessarily the money that becomes the impact to the victim, but more so the emotional response of the individual. In this position, I've heard a lot of people come to me and say that they're very shameful, they feel stupid, they grieve a little bit, that they've went into this state of depression. And probably about 80% of people who are victims of a scam actually end up feeling more of this emotional response, more so than the issue with losing the money. And also in this impact of the victim piece, we talk a lot about scams being through the phone, through email, but also these scams also happen in person. Scammers develop a significant relationship with individuals, and then over time scam them through that relationship. So also the loss of a relationship could be a major piece to the victim.
So when we're talking about some of these scams, one thing that we know is there's some typical scams that these imposters will rely on. We'll talk a little bit about some of those. You've probably heard of them. Social Security scam, the car warranty scams, charitable scams, but they're getting sophisticated insofar as they know people know the general scam. So they add variations to it. They add more details to it. And then certainly just following the news and doing things that are impacting folks right now, that are on folks' minds. So of course, during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of scams related to COVID-19 as it relates to vaccines prior to them being available. Once they were available, paying to get to the top of the line for vaccines. During the stimulus and economic recovery payments, it was folks saying they needed your information to give you your check, which was obviously fraudulent. Right now, there's talk in the news about Afghan refugees as we're pulling out of the war in Afghanistan. So now folks are using that to create charitable organizations that are fraudulent. It's not to say all of them are fraudulent, but there's some key things that we'll talk about that are clear as part of it. But when we're talking about the typical scam, so an example there's a scam called the grandparent scam. That's one where somebody will call up saying that they are with a granddaughter or a grandson of yours out of state, and they've gotten in trouble and they need money now, and they're maybe in jail, and so you need to send a gift card or you need to send money right now. One of the things that's clear when we talk about these scams are this idea that it's urgent and they want to get you when you're not thinking, when you haven't had a chance to really think through it, when you're in this sense of, oh my goodness, there's a panic and there's a problem and it needs to be fixed right now. They're preying on that, certainly. But it's becoming more sophisticated. So one that we've seen as well is this idea where now it's the grandparent scam, but instead of it being the friend or something that we've heard of more, now it's the lawyer calling on behalf of the grandson who's in New York in jail, or take whatever city that it may be, that they're in jail, I'm a lawyer. They've said that you may have some money to help pay my retainer, help pay their bond to get them out of custody. And really, we need to do this right now. They're hard up and I'm trying to help them. And now is the time that I have to help them. So if you can wire me the money right away, you can send me the money right away, I will get that and we'll move on. There's also sophistication in this insofar as people can get access to some of your information. So let's say you have a Facebook profile that has some public information. One of the things Facebook has is, who are your relatives? People will look and see that you have a grandson named John. They'll say, John Smith, for example, and that is your grandson. It's enough information that it makes you stop and say, maybe this isn't a scam. And that is the kind of stuff that they're relying on. So again, some of the stuff is fairly unsophisticated, but that's not the only clear indicator. There is some stuff that makes this very sophisticated that we need to be careful about when we're talking about these scams. So talking about kind of some of the current issues, certainly we've seen these issues of scams around healthcare, the pandemic, COVID-19. They've done that around contact tracing. So we knew that during the time of kind of quarantine and before the vaccines, the question was always, have you been around somebody that had exposure to COVID-19 or tested positive? Therefore, you maybe have exposure and you need to quarantine. So you're getting emails or text messages that say, click on this link because we need to find information about you being near somebody that has tested positive. Well, the problem is that link is going to have malware in it, or it's going to take you to a website that's wanting information about your personal identifying information, maybe your bank account, maybe your credit card. Sometimes it's not even that, and it's stuff where we think, okay, it's not a big deal. It could be giving your name, your phone number, your address, possibly social security number, but enough information that they're taking some of that personal identifying information, and maybe that information they get from you in this scam isn't enough for them to do a whole lot, but they take it and then they parlay that into other scams that they can then use. And so having your name, address, and phone number maybe helps them into another scam, like getting unemployment benefits or something along those lines. Of course, I mentioned the idea, vaccinations before that was available. The idea now is, getting you access to vaccines faster than other folks. Right now, the issue is, are there going to be booster vaccines? So folks are sophisticated to say, that's something we know we're hearing in the news, that there's going to be a third vaccine or a booster possibility. So people are taking that information to say, let's get you that booster, click on this link, or give me money and I'll put you first in line to get that booster vaccine. All of those are scams. There's not a way to jump in line. There's not a way to pay for it now. That's not the way this system is working. And it's those types of information that we see right now that's really kind of causing the issue as we go through this, that's about getting some type of information from you. Of course, one of the scams that's existed for a long time and that we see quite a bit are these ideas of, impersonating the government, Social Security Administration. I can't tell you, there's something about my work cell phone for while I'm on call as a DA that somehow it has hit all of these spam call lists. I probably get 4 times as many spam calls or text messages to my work cell phone than my personal number for some odd reason. The number of times I've gotten a call about my social security number being locked down or my social security number being compromised and I need to call back. Well, what they're doing, and something is always an issue. So one, the Social Security Administration, there's no such thing as your social security number being locked down, right? And the Social Security Administration doesn't necessarily know that somebody has compromised your social security number, so they're not going to be able to reach out for it. The other problem when you look at some of these scams is they're going to want information that doesn't make sense. So the Social Security Administration, the fact that they're contacting you, if it truly is the Social Security Administration, they know your number, right? They're not going to ask you for it. They know your name, they know your address because they're contacting you. They know your phone number. So that's where these scams really start to unravel when you're looking at this, when they say, give me your social security number, give me your name and address. Well, they're going to have that information if they've reached out to you. And it's not just, robots that are sending emails or sending text messages or doing robocalls. Same thing with the IRS and scams along those. Certainly, the census last year is always, every 10 years is a big opportunity for scammers to say, well, people are expecting to get contacted by the census. So it's an opportunity for me as the scammer to come across to individuals. So you're seeing things like the text message we see on the right of the screen saying, you can review and adjust your answers at this website. When you look at that website, this adjustform.com, that's not the government website. That's not the census website. So certainly that's a concern. We also see a ton of issues around sweepstakes fraud, including this idea that there's a national lottery or a national sweepstakes. Those are all fraudulent. Those don't exist. Things that do exist, like Publishers Clearinghouse, that is a legitimate sweepstakes. There's problems with it, but it is a legitimate organization. There's a lot of folks that take that legitimate organization and say, and in fact, Desiree and I just got 2 emails over the weekend about somebody saying that they were Publishers Clearinghouse and asking a community member for information. The way those work is, again, getting your financial information, getting your personal identifying information. A lot of times what we see in sweepstakes is, hey, you've won $1 million, but there's a $5,000 processing fee in order for us to get you the $1 million. Well, that sounds great, right? Like $5,000 up front isn't bad to get $1 million. The problem is no sweepstakes works that way. These issues that we will kind of talk about in a little bit around protecting yourself. Generally, if it's too good to be true, what's the answer? It typically is, right? And that's what we see when we're talking about a lot of these different scams. Similarly, the economic recovery and the economic issues during the pandemic were rife with scams that we saw. Certainly, I mentioned already the stimulus check scams. What we see as well is job scams. They know that people were out of work. They know people were looking for work. So we would see this idea of job scams. You see this email on the right. It's an email coming to you out of the blue saying, hey, the message that you wanted about a particular job, that one unfortunately isn't available, but I have another one that's available. I just need some information from you. And then I'd love to get you an administrative assistant or a personal assistant position. The problem here is you haven't applied for a position. And to the extent that you have, is this coming from the place that you've applied to? And typically the answer is going to be no. Also, if you've applied for this position, you look at the information that they're asking for, you would have given this information if you applied for a job. So this idea of full name and street address and phone number, that information you've already provided. So why would they ask for it? Just like we talked about with the government scams, they're not going to ask you for the social security number. They know that. They're not going to ask you for your name and some of that personal identifying information. They know that. And we also know in many times the way they reach out aren't the typical ways that the government's going to reach out. Same thing when we're talking about these job scams. But where the crux of the issue comes is if you look at the bottom there of the highlighted section, send a copy of your W-2 or your W-4 and or your driver's license. Well, that's when they start to get the key information that's going to allow them to commit fraud, allow them to commit a theft, allow them to impersonate you or get access to money that is going to create negative impacts on your life. Once you start sending that W-2 or W-4 that has your social security number on it, your driver's license that has that driver's license number on it, they're starting to unlock additional information about you that's going to allow them to use that to gain money and gain an advantage over you. We also saw significant issues around unemployment. There were a huge number of unemployment claims that became very quickly, and Department of Labor Employment was working as fast as they could to deal with this, and that allowed scammers to then do a ton of fraudulent unemployment claims. What we were seeing is they were taking any information they could find, personally identifying information about an individual, and then sometimes that was resulting in the scammer actually getting the money from the government. And then you would end up getting a 1099-G form when it came to tax time that said you need to claim the benefits that you received from unemployment. Like, wait a second, I didn't receive unemployment last year. Why is this coming? You're realizing at that point somebody had some information for you that allowed them to get money. In other times, it was people getting the credit card, the Relia card that was being offered by Division of Labor and Employment for the state, and it was coming in the mail. So the person tried to get it sent to them, changing your information, but when Division of Labor and Employment processed the application, they saw what your correct address was and then sent it to your correct address. And again, you're getting a credit card in the mail or a prepaid debit card, if you will, in the mail that you're like, wait a second, why am I getting this? That's why that was happening, because somebody had your information, was trying to get it routed to them, but it ended up getting routed to you. Those are the things that are creating the scam. And then the problem for you is, great, they didn't get the money from the government. And of course, you're going to not spend the money because you realized you didn't apply for unemployment. But then it's still hitting your social security number. And when it comes tax time, it's like, okay, well, now this is part of your tax liability. So trying to recover from that, we'll talk about some of that in a minute. I will say, as it relates to unemployment scam, we saw that so much over the last year and a half that we have a specific flyer as it relates to that on our website and ways to recover, who to contact, who to notify within Division of Labor and Employment so that can be corrected so it's not impacting your tax liability. We talked a little bit about the stimulus checks. We're seeing not just the issues of getting the stimulus checks, but we're seeing issues around getting a check. Again, a lot of times people are seeing this and saying, well, I'm getting a check, so why, where's the scam if I'm getting the check? Well, the scam ultimately is that typically what's happening is they're saying, cash the check, and then as soon as you cash the check, I need you to send me, $200, $500 of that check. Well, the issue is it's cashing the check against your account, and your account is getting pre-funded some of that money that you're then passing on to the other person. And then 3 days later, when the bank realizes that the check is fraudulent, it's now your account that's being fully hit for the amount of that check, including the money that got sent, that 200, 500, et cetera, amount of dollars that gets sent to the scammer that's somewhere in another state or another country when they do this. In addition to this, we're also seeing it coming from other scammers that are saying they're part of other companies. So for example, we have this one of Verizon Wireless saying, hey, I'm calling from Verizon Wireless, and because of the pandemic, we're trying to help our companies, and we received money from the federal government, so we want to pass it on to you. So call me back and give me some of your information, and then I'll be able to pass on this benefit from the federal government through Verizon Wireless to you. Well, of course, the problem is Chad isn't from Verizon Wireless. Chad is some guy in another state or another country that is going to get your information and then use that for nefarious purposes, for negative purposes, to impact your credit, impact your personal identifying information. That's going to create a problem. Online banking. This one is one that it's existed for a while, but I'll tell you, it's increased quite a bit during the time of the pandemic. The reason being is a lot of folks that weren't doing things online prior to the pandemic, and a lot of times we see that with our older adult population. I look at, my mom, my grandparents, they wanted to go to the store and shop. They wanted to go to Macy's. They wanted to go to King Soopers. They wanted to walk into US Bank or First Bank because that's always how they've done it. So this idea of online banking, online shopping was new and not something they wanted to do. Well, when the world shuts down for a year because of the pandemic, people had to adapt. And so folks that were unfamiliar with online banking, online shopping, et cetera, people realized that was happening, and the scammers, the imposters, were then preying on that. So you would get calls about online banking, you get text or emails about online banking. You see on the right a text saying that it's from HSBC Bank in terms of an issue with your request to pay somebody or your request to pay a bill. So click on this link and let's verify that. Well, of course, the problem is there's numerous problems the second you click on that link. Either one, there could be malicious software where it could take over your computer, get information off of your computer, put a virus onto your computer. Or when you click on that link, it's not taking you to HSBC. Maybe it looks like it, but as you start filling out a form that looks like it's for HSBC, it's now asking for your name, your account number, your routing number, your social security number, your driver's license number. That type of personal identifying information that is then going to allow the individuals to defraud you, commit identity theft, get money against your credit report, et cetera. So, what we see with this is, one on the right is just an example, but we see different ways that it could be on the left. It's always this, there's a problem that we need to fix. Or, you need to re-download the application, so please click on this link. And of course, it's not the actual application, it's a fraudulent application that has information, and they're going to use that to create problems for you. You need to contact them. The issue is always going to be, you really have to think, is this your bank calling? And you need to think about, is it your bank emailing? Should you click on the link? We'll talk more about some prevention tips in a minute, but with that one, call the bank directly. Call the number on the back of your debit card and deal with it that way. Go onto the bank's website that you know about to access your accounts versus clicking on these links that you don't know as well. For example, we see at the bottom of this page a Venmo link. It says, Venmo has seen unrecognized transaction in your account. Well, if you happen to use Venmo, you may be concerned. Well, maybe there is a problem with my Venmo. I want to make sure that somebody hasn't accessed my Venmo. Well, then you look at that website, that's not the Venmo website, right? It has Venmo in the name, but a bunch of other things. So you really have to be vigilant when you're looking at some of that information. So I talked about the move to online banking, similar with online shopping. That one is one where we have significant problems. We saw during the pandemic an increase in complaints about this online shopping. Better Business Bureau over the last year said that online shopping scams or bad products or whatever it may be increased from 24% the year before to 38% of all complaints that they received last year because of part of it's just the general increase in online shopping, but part of it is because scammers knew of that increase and started to create fraudulent sites. I'll give you an example. I almost fell prey to this a couple years ago, where again, one of those deals, too good to be true. Everybody now knows about the Roomba iRobot, vacuum. Well, those things are not very cheap, right? They're pretty expensive. And across my Facebook page, here's a website that's offering the thing for, $75 plus shipping. It's one of those like, really? And I had that second of it's too good to be true, but I looked at it. And luckily, as I started looking at it, ultimately it was like, oh, it's too good to be true. And then you start looking into the company, turns out you either don't get the product that you're looking for, or you get some bogus product that they do ultimately mail so they can say they fulfilled their part of the deal, but it's nowhere close to the product that you were ordering. It doesn't work like the product you thought you were ordering, like the Roomba, for example, that electric robot or that electric vacuum cleaner, those sorts of things. So of course, those bargain basement prices, you know, the too good to be true. Looking at the website design, right? Is the grammar, the English, the language, the spelling, is that incorrect? A lot of times you're going to get these knockoff websites that look to be legitimate sellers, but again, they're either not going to deliver on the product, or they're going to give you some cheap knockoff of the product that you're paying basically fair market price for. So you really want to make sure you're doing your homework when you're talking about some of this unfamiliar websites with things. So, you know, issues with, you know, we don't see these issues with Amazon largely. Of course, there's always issues, but, you know, there's reputable websites. Doing that homework, and a lot of times you can just type in a Google search for this company and find out that there are problems when we're talking about these types of companies. Romance scam. This is another one that's existed for a long time, but it really has the ability to escalate during, you know, problems in our economy. So for example, with the romance scam, you know, we had people that you weren't getting out, you weren't meeting people in person. And so people were turning to online dating. They were turning to, you know, talking to people over social media. And so the scams as it related to these increased. There were people that were isolated at home. They were looking for companionship, looking for somebody to talk to. These work in various ways, but as Desiree talked about as we were kind of doing the intro, some of these scammers are playing the long game. So we've talked about some of the scammers where it's the immediate, hey, I have a problem and I need you to help me now, and you have 10 minutes and they're catching you off guard and they want that money right away. Sometimes these romance scams kind of play the opposite. They'll talk to you for a month, you know, and you develop a relationship and they're saying all the right things. And then suddenly it's like, hey, I want to come see you, and I'd love to come to Colorado to see you. Can you send me $500 so I can buy this ticket? They'll even show you, you know, here's the cost of the plane ticket from Florida to get to Colorado. Can you send me that money so that I can come there and see you? Well, turns out, you know, it's not the love of your life from Florida. It's, you know, instead this person that has been playing that long game with you and is just looking to get that money once they've kind of hooked you and developed that friendship, that relationship, that romance, that connection, whatever it is. You know, the other way this plays out, you see in kind of the second one is, you know, you've had that conversation for the month, you've developed some trust, some relationship with the person, and now suddenly they've fallen on hard times. And I can't pay my rent, I can't pay my car payment, I can't pay my internet service or my cell service. So therefore, I can't keep communicating with you. So if you could help me, this will allow us to continue the relationship. So you give that, you know, $100, $200, $300, and sometimes that's it, and that's the end of it. Sometimes it's, oh wait, we got you hooked. You did pay the $300, so it's $300 this month. Next month, you know, it's $300 this month for the phone bill. Next month, it's $1,000 for the rent payment. After that, it's something more. That's how we're kind of seeing these scams, and those are the things to watch out for when we're talking about it. I mentioned briefly already kind of the grandparent scam. You know, this is the, you know, grandma or grandpa, you know, I'm in the hospital, I'm stuck in another country, I'm stuck in jail. Or a lot of times it's, you know, your grandson is in a really bad accident, your grandson is in jail. You know, I talked about the lawyer example. I'm the lawyer representing your grandson that's in jail in New York, help them out. When I was working at a prior DA's office, during the middle of the workday, one of our legal assistants actually fell prey to, well, almost fell prey, I should say, to one of these scams where it was this idea of a family member being in a really bad accident somewhere. They got this phone call and they were hooked, and it was, oh my goodness, you know, what do I need to do? And they, of course, there's that scare and there's the concern for the family member, and that is taken to then create this issue in the person and this need to fix the problem. And that legal assistant was in a situation where she was within about 5 minutes of sending money to this scammer because she honestly thought that this individual was in a really bad accident. Luckily, while this was happening, somebody walked by her cubicle and saw that she was upset and had a conversation with her and said, you know, hey, I don't know if that's actually the case. You may want to just kind of take a step back, take a pause, and see if you can kind of check into this and verify some of this. Well, literally, that was all she needed to do. Once she got that information, somebody kind of gave her that advice. She took that step back. Sure enough, that issue of, you know, this being her nephew, her grandson, whatever the situation was, she reached out to family and they said, no, that person isn't in the other state. That person's at school right now. I don't even know what you're talking about. And the scam started to unravel. So that's one of the key things Desiree will talk about here in a minute. But that idea of just taking a breath, taking a pause. I'll give you one last example. Happened also with my mom, who got one of these, and I think Desiree may have an example of this coming up. The idea of, you know, the computer support scam. This is Microsoft and there's a problem with your computer and we'll help you out. Just, you know, send us your credit card information. We'll sign you up for this program. Well, luckily she took a step and she called me and said, is this legitimate? And then I said, well, is there a problem with your computer? And of course, you know, she's like, well, it's been a little slow recently. I said, yeah, but did you reach out to somebody? And she said, no. And I said, there's nobody remotely that's going to know there's a problem with your computer unless you have reached out to them first. And so then, of course, she took a step back and we were able to stop that scam from happening. So again, that's one of those key things. Just take that breath, take that pause, think through it a little bit, and then moving from there.
So one of the common scams too that happens through email is phishing. Many of you have probably gotten this because I have gotten these Netflix and Amazon scams where they pretty much ask you to click on a link through the email and update your account information. What they're really doing is just requesting your personal identifying information so that they can scam you in the future, and then also request more problems with your computer, more problems with your account, and then ask you to pay for it. On the right, you see an Amazon scam where they're requesting the amount of $732.18 in US dollars, or that they process charges in that amount, and that to unlock your account and receive a refund, you're gonna have to click that verify now button. I actually almost fell prey to a scam like this regarding Venmo. I got the email, and then I do have a Venmo account, but I don't really use it all that often. So I was kind of curious to know what was going on. But, you know, in the back of my mind, I was thinking this is maybe a scam. So I did go into the Venmo account through the actual Venmo site and saw nothing there. So then I realized that email at the time was an actual scam, such is the case with this Amazon phishing scam through email. Also, I've heard a little bit more about the email or computer takeover situations that are happening. So usually you're on your computer, you're doing your thing, you're looking at websites, and all of a sudden you'll get this pop-up saying, warning, your system may have detected viruses on your computer, or that there's some kind of threat to your computer, and they'll want you to contact this toll-free number. Well, yeah, I guess it is possible, but it's kind of like thinking about, you know, is this legitimate? I had a gentleman come in to us, and he said it took him 5 months to come to the district attorney's office because of thoughts of shame and everything of having his computer taken over. And his computer was taken over for 5 months, and he kept sending money to the scammers. But when you have this, definitely disconnect your computer, turn your computer off, take it into a computer site or computer business that can get rid of any kind of malware that's on it, and give us a call and find out what steps you need to take to resolve the computer takeover issue. So I just want to go over how to avoid a scam. And like I mentioned before, scams come in all sorts of different ways. And it's really just kind of like stopping, taking a breath, and allowing yourself the time to think critically about the situation. I had a call the other day regarding a grandparent scam, and that the person did have a loved one in Denver, and apparently they were in an accident. And during that scam, they took a breath and realized that they're going to call their grandson and see if they really did get into an accident. And live on that same call, the person was actually fine and okay in Denver. So at that point, they realized it was a scam. Also, you can block unwanted calls and text messages. Like Christian was mentioning, I think you are correct in saying that you get more scam calls on your work phone, because I've noticed that too. But just blocking them or deleting them, or in my case, sometimes I use them as examples. And whenever someone is reaching out to you and they're asking for that personal identifying information or even your financial information, don't give it out. Just, you can hang up the phone. I think in today's society that we all want to be respectful, and we go out into the world thinking the best in people, and that you know, we don't want to make people upset. But in the case of scammers, it's totally fine to hang up. It's totally fine to delete their text messages, delete their emails. Again, in line with taking that break, is resist the pressure to act immediately. It's kind of hard, especially when these pretenders, these scammers, these imposters, they know what to say to really get you to react emotionally. But I think the better way, the more we become aligned with our own emotions and understand that, you know, we're feeling that pressure, that we can resist that urge to act immediately. Also, know that scammers, they're going to tell you to pay in all sorts of different ways. I don't know if they actually use cash these days, but wire transfers, Bitcoin. I don't know if anyone's used Dogecoin, but that's another cryptocurrency. And then also stop and talk to someone you trust. What I hear most often these days is that someone is a victim of a scam and they feel that sense of shame and that they feel stupid, that they don't want to talk about it. But really, if you don't talk about it, then you can't prevent the next person from becoming a victim of a scam. Also want to put in here how to report a scam. So the Federal Trade Commission has a really nice online form that you can fill out to report a lot of the phone scams, or just different scams that come through. If there's some reason why you can't access that website or you don't have a computer, give me a call, give the district attorneys a call, and we'll help you fill out that form or fill it out for you on your behalf. And also, if you're a victim of a scam or you're an active victim of a scam, then contact your local law enforcement agency. Also, I know Boulder PD and Boulder County Sheriffs, they have a nice online criminal report. Then you can also contact the Community Protection Division. I just want to put another tag out there for identity theft. So with 2020 and a lot of us going online to purchase items, to do our work, that there were a lot of data breaches in 2020, and that a lot of our own personal identifying information has gone out into the world, and these scammers, they do purchase it and then start making calls to people. If you are, if you've experienced identity theft, especially with the unemployment insurance benefit, then definitely contact Colorado Department of Labor, and then give us a call too, because we can walk you through the steps of how to recover your identity. So again, we're going to go into that. How do you protect yourself from identity theft? Like I mentioned, some of the information about you is probably out in the world, and sometimes it's stolen, purchased, or even we put it out there in the world through social media like Facebook. But what you can do to protect yourself is share as little information as possible. That's both, I take that with social media a lot. I don't like posting pictures. I don't like sharing a lot of information about myself, because I know that scammers are out there and they're reviewing those Facebook posts. Also, a really great tip regarding protecting yourself from identity theft is to order that credit report at annualcreditreport.com, or you can call the number right there. I believe the credit reports, you can still pull them every week, but typically you get one free credit report a year. You can also consider a fraud alert or credit report freeze once you take a look at your annual credit report. And you know, I know it can be tedious, but definitely monitor your bills and your bank accounts and statements. If you're still getting paper statements, make sure that you go through them, make sure there's no funny business going on there. You can also file your taxes early. And then also, I just learned this working with the district attorney's office, is Mail important documents inside a post office, not even through the little box that sits outside, but inside the post office. Also, don't put personal identifying information in your mailbox with a little flag up, because that's pretty much telling a scammer to, hey, I got mail in here and it could be important. Also, with those statements, once you're done using them and you've looked at them, make sure to store or shred them safely, because scammers will go through the trash to look at what documents are being thrown away. And then again, don't pick up the phone from unknown or blocked numbers. If you have a group of friends and family that give you calls frequently, save their numbers in your contacts so you know who's calling, and then just don't pick up the unknown or blocked numbers. More steps. When it comes to online anything, managing your passwords can really help. So any kind of account that you have, work, social media, financial, changing those passwords often, and then also changing them using passphrase. And this is probably kind of actually this is difficult, but it's more so difficult to remember, because when you use something like passphrase, you're using all sorts of different letters, characters, what was it called? Uppercase, lowercase, and it makes it harder to access your online accounts. Also, don't open or reply to emails when you don't recognize the sender. It's probably one of those things that we all need to train ourselves on, is looking at who the sender is. If the sender doesn't look like someone that's legitimate, then don't answer it, just delete the email. Also, don't click on links or attachments in unsolicited emails. Like I mentioned with that Venmo one, I almost clicked that email, but then decided to go through Venmo.com. Also, be smart about your devices. You can install probably need to install software updates when offered, and then also consider multi-factor authentication. Definitely go into all your social media accounts and look at your privacy settings. Most social media accounts actually remind you to do this, and then also take you through certain settings reminding you what you have public and what you have private. And speaking of privacy, just remember that public Wi-Fi is not private. So I mentioned before the recovering from identity theft. So identitytheft.gov has some steps that you can take. You can also report identity theft there. But things that you can do if you realize that your identity has been stolen is call the companies where the fraud occurred, place a fraud alert and get your credit reports, report identity theft to the FTC, and then file a report with your local police department. And if for any reason you can't remember these steps or you don't know where to turn, definitely call us at the Community Protection Division.
So this is some of the key phrases that we've talked about as kind of that takeaway. Take a breath. Don't answer numbers you don't know. Don't pick up the phone. Hang up. Don't pay by gift card. Don't share your personal identifying information. A lot of those key things that we've talked about throughout the day that will really kind of help you protect yourself from some of these scams. So I know we didn't leave a ton of time for questions, but this last slide has our information, but we also do have a few minutes for questions. We wanted to make sure we left some time, but also got through all the information. So Brett, I don't know if there's anything in the chat or the Q&A that you have for us at this point, but
no. So I am going to invite everyone who's listening to please go ahead and type your questions into the chat and the Q&A. I actually had a question. I love doing this because I get to learn so much myself. Specifically, when looking at those unemployment benefits scams where someone will impersonate someone and claim unemployment benefits using information that they've gotten. It sounded like there are some specific tax consequences, like there would be some tax income that you would need to declare. What remedies exist out there to correct that information, or are you, as the person who was scammed, kind of stuck paying the tax bill for someone who stole your identity?
No, that's a great question. So you're definitely not stuck with the tax burden if you didn't receive the benefits. The key with that is figuring out that you were defrauded. So what we had talked about is, as I mentioned, if you get that prepaid debit card in the mail, obviously there's a problem if you didn't apply for it. So you need to, take action right away. Or if, somebody else actually got the credit card as they wanted under your name and was using it, and then you get the 1099-G, you have to take action right away. So part of that is contacting the Colorado Division of Labor and Employment, filing a claim. Claim is probably a bad word because there's a claim for unemployment, but filing something with them. They have a specific process to note this fraud because it did happen so much last year, to file that sort of report with them that you did not receive this. This was not you that applied for it. It allows them to look into it, to be able to show that you didn't get this money, so you shouldn't bear the tax burden, and then can potentially also give them information to then figure out who the person was so they could take action against that person that did it. But and although that action against the other person we would like to have happen, the number one thing is to make sure that it's documented so that you're not bearing the burden as the victim. So with Division of Labor and Unemployment is a good way, is the key way to do it, and they have a process for that. But we also suggest notifying your local law enforcement agency. You want to be able to do that so you can have a police report. Again, there's probably little that local agency is going to be able to do right away to find the scammer, but having that police report is going to be important when you're showing this identity theft, you're showing that this isn't your tax liability. So sometimes even just that online report, if your local agency has that, like Boulder Sheriff's and Boulder PD has, you're not necessarily looking for that response from law enforcement, but you can show that you've made the report and you have that record. And then also making that note with your with the 3 credit reporting companies. They may or may not have your social security number, but better safe than sorry to make sure that that's noted, associated with your credit file. All of those different steps are going to help you to the extent that the IRS is insisting that you have some additional tax liability for some benefit you didn't get. You can show the claim to, or again, I'm using bad terminology, you can show the report that you made to Division of Labor and Employment. You could show the report you made with local law enforcement. You could show the report that you've made to the 3 credit reporting companies that this is a problem once you identify it.
Thank you so much. I think those are some really important steps that people can take.
I would note also, as if there's any folks still thinking about questions, one thing I do want to note is we created, because we love to be out in the community, either in person or even just doing these virtual presentations. We weren't able to do nearly as much as we like over the last year and a half. So one of the ways that we tried to deal with that is we created a lot of flyers as issues were coming up. So if you go to the DA's office website, which you see here on this final slide, you can get access to the various flyers that we have. So there's one specifically about personal identifying information and what to do if that's compromised, what to do to protect yourself, passcodes, multi-factor, gives you some details about that. There is a specific flyer as to Brett's question about the unemployment scam. There's a specific flyer in terms of how that works and how to correct the problem. There's specific flyers about some of the COVID scams, some of the economic recovery scams. So definitely, I think that's a good resource right now because we've tried to stay up to date, being less able to be out in the public and do these types of trainings. So please utilize those resources and also just utilize us. Our phone numbers, direct numbers are there, main number is there, email addresses. We want to help people both from a prevention standpoint, but certainly also from a recovery standpoint.
Yeah, and I went ahead and put the Community Protection Unit's website into the chat where all of those great resources are.
Great, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. I'm just gonna take over the screen share once more and share our sponsor slide with everyone listening. I wanted to say thank you again. This is always such an important topic and such an ever-changing topic because people are very creative and particularly people who are trying to get other people's money or identifying information. So it's always really fascinating to hear about these scams and learn about ways that we can all protect ourselves. So thank you again.
Of course, thanks so much for the opportunity to be a part of Senior Law Day, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. And just again, a reminder, we have a Ask a Lawyer this Saturday from 9 to noon at the Longmont Senior Center. And our next topic, our next webinar will be Tuesday from noon to 1 on retirement income. So we're really looking forward to that. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.